Do you find that's a barrier for doctors to really jump over that, especially once they've been in practice or one of those models for a long enough period of time where they're no longer comfortable managing chronic diseases because they haven't done it for a while? And how do they get over that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of doctors within a corporate setting can monitor, right, and treat. A lot of sublease doctors, LC, Walmart, whatever the case is, have OCTs, have the latest technology, do that. Some of the other models, some say they can't adopt the medical model because things are just too busy or the staff's not trained and things like that. But as they kind of look to expand their practice, I think I find more sublease doctors because they're invested in their practice that want to do this and can do it because they can invest. Sometimes they can't make a decision. Even a private practice, they can't what they want to have and what they want to do because they're not the decision maker. But a lot of practices will see a lot of disease, and it's their decision whether they want to treat it or send it out. So every doctor is a little different. So even some private practitioners that I've seen here in Rhode Island still practice 1970s optometry.
No, that's exactly the point. Yeah, that's exactly the point.
So it all depends on the doctor. It's not the four walls that sets. And I've seen a lot of great practices. I've seen one doctor in New York. He does, myopia management. He does ortho K. He's been doing it for years. So it all depends on what the doctor wants to do and what they're happy with. So that's one of the things. But I find that more sublease doctors and that independent thing take more of a role to kind of initiative to do the next step. And that was one of the things with CODA that I really wanted to have doctors embrace to kind of, be independent, grow their practice, expand scope of practice as well for optometry, because our profession is a legislative profession. It's changing, it's continuing to change. And I think there's always opportunities where in optometry, whether it's corporate or private, and doctors they just got to take it, by themselves, the initiative to do it. I never started in a busy practice. I was at a Sears Optical, and I found opportunities. I was able to have a good income. Net sometimes was the same as a lens crafters that I found out when I did a business evaluation for them. It's really the doctor and what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to the Crystal Podcast on iCode Media. Today is the very first episode of 2021, and hopefully this is going to be a different year in 2021 than 2020, although I'm not entirely convinced that it will be. It'll probably be a gradual change and a gradual adjustment back to some sort of normal, or continuing on with some sort of normal. But in any case, today I had a really fun conversation with Maria Sampalis, who owns a private practice as well as has a lease on a corporate location. And we talked about the nuances of corporate optometry as well as the struggles that corporate optometrists go through in terms of negotiations and maintaining their own independence. And so it was a fun conversation for me, especially to dig into areas and topics that I don't know a ton about. And so please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. We've been providing myopia control treatments in our practice for years. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, CooperVision has received FDA approval of its innovative MiSight one-day contact lens. This will be the cornerstone of a comprehensive myopia management approach to be offered by CooperVision. This daily wear, single-use contact lens is the first and only FDA-approved product clinically proven to slow the progression of myopia when initially prescribed for children 8 to 12 years old and when compared to children in the control group wearing a single-vision one-day contact lens. Check out the show notes for all the specific prescribing details and to get more information about this lens and how you can begin to offer it in your practice. So how do you divide your time between your private practice and your corporate practice?
So I have doctors that work. Corporate practice are new, so they're part-time per se. And then over here is like 4 days a week. So I can set up, change up my schedule.
So how many corporate practices do you have?
Right now, one.
Okay. Is that where you started, or like that's what you started and then you built your private practice, or did you build your private practice and move the other way?
Yeah, so no, I started in corporate at Sears, and then, sorry, I just put drops in my eyes. I started at Sears, and Sears closed, so I have my own business. And then what happened was during COVID recently, this doctor retired, so bought his practice and combined things together. So
Yeah. Do you so Sears closed. When did they go bankrupt? Probably 5-6 years ago.
Sears closed 3 years ago.
Okay.
So when Sears closed, they gave me like 3 weeks notice. So I opened a new practice in 3 weeks. And
holy cow! How'd you find the space?
I got lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say three weeks is crazy.
I got lucky. Yeah. It was kind of nice in that aspect because it was an insurance company before there, and didn't have to really do a build out. I just put an exam lane in and dispensary, and kind of went from there. So,
what percentage of your patients followed you from Sears to? Were they your patients or were they Sears patients?
No, they were my patients because I was subleased, so it's a little different. Okay. And patients do follow, right? So if the place closed, where are they going to go? There's no competition. So most of them followed. Some of them are just. Sometimes they're routine yearly exams, and sometimes they're just coming in because they have a problem specific or they need glasses. So I would say about 60-70% really did follow, and even now. I've had patients where they come in and I haven't seen them in 5 years, but they're still seeing me, so that they're not going anywhere. So, and if they need value, I have value eyewear for them, and I have different options for them.
Do you think that, so I think when I listened to that story of 3 weeks in an insurance build out, so in full disclosure, I've never started my own practice. I have a partner with my father, so I'm purchasing him out of the practice, and so I've never actually said I'm going to sit down and start a practice from nothing. And he did in about early 2000s. I mean, he did multiple times, but early 2000s he did almost the exact same thing. He saw a need in a small town, which was a bedroom community at the time of Omaha, and it still is, and but he did the same thing. I think it was an insurance place that had closed down, and I remember going in there with him and my mom, and had old carpet, old like basically a bench or a table that was sort of could have been an optician desk, and so we had that. It was already built in, and there was one room, a closet, a bathroom, and anyway, my point is that like you didn't need a lot to do it. That community just didn't have eye care, and so I just wonder, like now you see people coming out of school, and you think, and I'm the same way. Like I would want to have, I've been practicing almost 12 and a half years, and it would be really hard, I think, coming out of school and not having, let's say, an Optos, a autophoropter, a OCT. Topography. I mean, like all the things that we get used to using. You don't have to have it. But do you think that's a barrier for people actually opening a practice?
No, because I opened a practice when Sears closed. I opened a practice with under $30,000. So I opened it, but I was able to save money working in a corporate practice. I make a little more money than being employed per se. You have also those admin headaches, but you learn kind of like on the way. And, you build a patient base. Patients will come because they're coming for eyeglass specials, but they stay because of the doctor, right? And because I built that patient base, and I had the medical model, I had the autorefractor, I had the retinal camera from before, and things like that. And as my practice was growing, I was looking for discounts because they provided some things like FDT and things like that, but visual field. I've expanded my practice now where I am looking to incorporate an OCT, but you kind of build it slowly. And because of the additional income in these practices, because the overhead's lower, and there's no investment, you're making good income to start your own business if that's what you want. And for me, I was able to, move in quickly because that's what needed to be done in order to not lose those patients. And I got lucky with no build out. But I had the equipment to get rolling too. So I had an EMR and things like that. So I would tell doctors, look, there are bigger ticket items that you can probably hold off on, and you can practice. You can still do a good job. But most of the thing is data, and you got to be able to keep that data. And EMR is one way to really get familiar with that and building your social network and your personal brand.
Yeah, I think that I guess my entire point about that is exactly what you said, is that you have the ability, you don't have to do it all at once, and you have the ability to kind of grow over time into your patient population to offer different services. And I'm just wondering if you have a pulse on corporate practice. I've practiced 1 day a week in a commercial location as an independent contractor for a year and a half when I first got out of school. So my perspective is certainly, I think I have some perspective. I clearly have no perspective of what it's like right now to be in corporate practice, but I think you have that. So what I'm trying to kind of garner is, when you look at like surveys about where students want to practice and then where they wind up practicing, there seems to be a disconnect between when they're in school and then when they're out of school. And so I'm just wondering if part of that disconnect between what they want and then the reality of what they choose, if some of that is just a perception that they have to have just this amazing space and all the technology that they want in order to practice optometry. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've done the survey in the corporate optometry group. So we on the students, and they do. Some of them will say, "I just want to go private practice," and then when they're looking for a job and what they want, sometimes it depends on the demographics and where they are, and the job positions. But some of them will go into the corporate practice. A lot of the corporate practices will have the latest technology. They'll have retinal cameras. They'll have optos. They'll have tech support. Things like that. So they're able to practice the way they want. Each brand's a little different. Some brands are more medical model based than others, and the group has been very good to kind of help doctors make that decision and ask colleagues about that, and that's why the group's grown tremendously over the last 5 years because of that. Because there was a need for in the industry for doctors to collaborate and get ideas from each other and opinions besides just whatever was marketed to them at the optometry schools. And one of the things that I've been working with is, trying to work with the optometry schools, because they still have that closed-mindedness about, what optometry should be, and it's kind of practicing the old model per se. A lot of doctors have.
Sorry, can you amplify what you mean by that? What would be the old model?
There's still some negativity about corporate optometry in the optometry schools.
Well, let's be honest. There's negativity about corporate optometry in the general in not the general public, but in the general optometric community, I would say as well.
Of course there is. So in the group, there's negative, there's pros and cons. But in the end of the day, if we're able to practice the way that we want, and the major goal is to keep optometry independent, so we don't go pharmacy. So if sublease model is the preferred. Now, if doctors go into thinking that they should be employed, and because they're making a good salary per se, but they're seeing 40, 50 patients a day, how much longer can that work? I mean, I've been out of school for about 13 years. I can't do that anymore. I'm tired. Just to get 2 kids out the door, I'm exhausted in the morning, So I think that's important perspective too. And they're saying that, if you're 70% coming out are female, they're saying that, employed model is the best way to go because of this scenario. And, I work 3 days a week. I used to work sublease 3 days a week, make more income, work less per se, and built a patient base for now where my kids are older. And it makes sense because there is more financial stress per se, because as they get older, there's more things. And I was able to do that at that point. And so I think it's kind of also the model to, if you want to go private, I think the way that it's going to change now is that they will go sublease, build a patient base, and then move out, or stay and take on additional practice if that's what they want to do.
Is that actually a strategy that you guys there are people that are working toward?
That's right. So I'll talk to a lot of doctors. Conversations are private, but a lot of doctors are like, I'm looking to do this, pay off my loans, and then build a patient base. And if things work out, start my own practice. So I think how it's been, it used to in the industry, the data was showing at 10 years out. Now it's at about 12, 13. And to
What
start their own
happens at 10
practices.
years out? Why 10 years is the magic number? Is it because your student loans are paid for, or you have more confidence, or?
I think it's both. I think it's student loans and confidence. And that was the data that I had gotten from the group. And I think that was something where, doctors are kind of like settled per se, and they know what they want to do.
Are you guys including like practice, like employees of a private equity group, where you're reaching out to those employees to kind of join your corporate model? Because what I've seen is that a lot of these practices that sell to private equity, when they were what we would consider a private practice, but employing multiple doctors, those employed doctors felt like they were in a private practice. They felt like they had ownership. They may have had bonus structures that were basically ownership of of their income in some form or fashion. But then the things that they worry about changing tend to change, and I've seen multiple times where this happens, and the employed docs leave. But they weren't really thinking. They were thinking private equity is still private practice, but it seems to me a lot of them are run like employed corporate practices.
Yeah.
Are you seeing some movement?
Yeah. So I wrote an article on that, private equity being a form of corporate optometry, and did a survey in the group, and a lot of doctors feel it's that way. And I think that's a big shift in the industry too, where if doctors want to, buy a practice, they feel like they have to kind of compete against that. But yeah, I mean, the private equity companies that I've looked at contracts at from doctors that work, the salaries are much higher. They're longer term contracts, but the terms are different. So I'll tell them, I say, your contract's not renewed for 3 years. This is you can't, negotiate terms within, after 3 years. The restricted covenants are higher, right? And if you're a young grad and new grad and you don't know, if you're doing fill-in work and you're mile 7, or you're a floater, 7-mile radius is basically the whole state if you're doing 2-3 offices, right? And then there's non-disclosures and things like that. I've written articles about that as well, with red flags and contracts. So there's been debates in the group. They're saying it's private practice, but if that's not doctor owned and a corporation owns it, it's a corporate optical.
I think it's interesting. Sorry, Maria, go ahead. These Zoom things there's a little lag, so.
No, that's fine. So there was discussion in the group about that, whether it's private practice or corporate, and there are private equity docs, employees or owners, and I think they're part of that group, that sector of corporate optometry.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, it isn't intuitive, because it comes from a it's kind of founded historically in private practice, where it's sort of eking in on private practices and buying them up. So we think about them like private practices, but once it typically is. It's not always the case, but the stories I've heard are that a year, maybe that's stable. 2 years, that starts to feel less like the private practice to the employed OD. So what I thought you said was interesting, that I want to kind of dig into a little bit more, is the goal is you said, I'm drawing a blank, sublease, right? The goal is leasing. Explain why that's the goal over being an employed OD in a commercial location, and how that's different.
Yeah. So for me, that was the goal of the group, to kind of do that, because if optometry goes towards that employed model, we turn into pharmacy. Okay. And, that could be some pros for some doctors, but I think for the industry as a whole, I think doctors being independent, whether it's private practice or within a corporate setting, is the best thing. The doctor makes a decision on the patient, what they want to fit, the model they want to do, and then certain laws and scope of practice, right? So doctors have investment in their industry, in their practice, to kind of, pull the industry together and move for a different scope. So I thought that was important. So when I developed the Corporate D Alliance group, the CODA, as I call it, that was one of the major focuses to do that and to help employed ODs show them that, sublease model is, if you're nervous, the easier way to go. And then as you bring confidence to take on another one or do what you want after the fact. So that is one of the big things. And that's why I write a lot of articles on practice management that I have on my website and how to get started and vendor discounts, things that doctors have right there. That's easy to go. Instead of saying this might be too hard, say, look, download these 2 documents, contact these people, and you can get started. It's that easy. And I think it's good for the industry and our profession if we continue to, keep that independent model instead of, the employed model per se for the long term, as we can monitor our own patients and make decisions how we want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's absolutely ideal. What do corporations, how do they respond to that? Do they have just one model where they say, look, we're just going to employ you and that's all we're going to do? Or are there ways to say, look, you've got an open slot, but I don't want to be employed. I want to have control of my patient decisions, and so I'm not going to do that. Like, I won't mention the company, but I get letters all the time from this company that say, well, we'll pay you $10,000 to relocate and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, but it's not how I want to practice. So are those negotiable, or what have you found?
Yeah. So there's different models, right? So the sublease, so you can rent. There's independent contractor positions, and then there's employment positions. Each brand is a little different on what their strategy is. But I've known that Walmart will have an employed position. If a doctor wants to be subleased, they could do that. I think America's Best models are, mostly employed. And then Luxottica has their mostly sublease, but they employ in certain states. I think there's 12 states that they can employ, and they do so. Everything is negotiable. They think that a lot of doctors I talk to, we do a lot of contract negotiations, and they'll say, well, this is a big company, I can't negotiate. Of course you can. They have quotas to make. They have to fill these spots. Each spot, my understanding on certain companies is $100,000 to recruit for one spot. That costs money to the company, right? So they need to fill those spots. And they're all for big, lucrative bonus structures because they need to fill those spots, right? So if they had those spots full, they wouldn't be doing that. So I think doctors need to understand what they negotiate and what they can. And I've helped a lot of doctors increase salary, $25,000 a year and sign-on bonuses ranging. So sometimes they say they don't give it, and they do. And you can negotiate a lot of things. But I think that, going in with that mentality, if you're going to make a lot of money per se, know that you're going to see a lot of patients. They need to make back their income. So you need to produce. But sign-on bonuses are good, but they're also tax. There's 50% tax usually on that. So some things that doctors just need to understand and know. But I always say, you can try it. The out clauses usually are between 30 to 90 days, depending on the company. And everything is negotiable. I've negotiated my contracts and continue to negotiate my contracts. Right now, I'm in a contract negotiation with one company to take on a sublease. I've asked for 12 edits, and it's gotten done. So,
do you think so? I think the crux of the concern, perhaps, if we're going to kind of dig into, the perception that corporate practice is somehow different than private practice, and you have a good perspective of this. When you talk about like the medical model, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, the medical model for me is to build my patients, have them trust me to see whatever they need to see me for. And I think because of the industry changes, online competitors, vision plans, we need to adapt. We need to change. So our perspective, our image in the industry or in the community is the doctor that they need to see for their eyes instead of 1-800 contacts or going to the emergency room for a pink eye. So that as well has been a big thing where I've written a lot of articles on how to get started and did a lot of webinars on that as well. It's very easy to get started. It's not a big investment. You can start baby steps, learn how to do billing and coding. and keep that patient retention too. So I've had something simple as a retinal camera image where patients, they're just routine, and they said, I come back every year because you have my image. So more of a patient retention thing as well, besides just a revenue boost. With all this noise out there and that patients get all this information, let them know that you're the one. And I think that's one of the ways to kind of combat, all this misinformation out there, free eye exams and, online refractions.
Well, I think it's pretty clear when you are providing for patients who need a plethora of services, that patients will perceive that naturally to be different than when they go someplace and they have a free eye exam if they buy 2 pairs of glasses. And if all I'm doing, I guess my question would be, if all I'm doing is doing the same thing, but now I'm charging them for their eye exam and charging them appropriately for their glasses, I'm not using any loss leaders or anything like that, then if that's all I'm doing, then I'm just practicing optometry in a private practice, but I'm practicing the same way as I would if I were employed. So how do you, I guess my point is that if that's all I'm doing, then all I'm doing is shifting, a corporate employed model into a private practice. But if I've embraced the idea that the most important thing is the doctor-patient relationship, and we have to maintain that, and I'm actually following through on that by screening and managing both simple acute diseases as well as complex chronic diseases in my practice, then there's no confusion by the patient about what they're getting in my practice versus what they can get online or in a location that is just basically has the doctor in there to generate a prescription so that they can sell glasses. So I guess my question is, do you find that's a barrier for doctors to really jump over that, especially once they've been in practice or one of those models for a long enough period of time where they're no longer comfortable managing chronic diseases because they haven't done it for a while? And how do they get over that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of doctors within a corporate setting can monitor, right, and treat. A lot of sublease doctors, LC, Walmart, whatever the case is, have OCTs, have the latest technology, do that. Some of the other models, some say they can't adopt the medical model because things are just too busy or the staff's not trained and things like that. But as they kind of look to expand their practice, I think I find more sublease doctors because they're invested in their practice that want to do this and can do it because they can invest. Sometimes they can't make a decision. Even a private practice, they can't what they want to have and what they want to do because they're not the decision maker. But a lot of practices will see a lot of disease, and it's their decision whether they want to treat it or send it out. So every doctor is a little different. So even some private practitioners that I've seen here in Rhode Island still practice 1970s optometry.
No, that's exactly the point. Yeah, that's exactly the point.
So it all depends on the doctor. It's not the 4 walls that sets. And I've seen a lot of great practices. I've seen one doctor in New York. He does, myopia management. He does ortho K. He's been doing it for years. So it all depends on what the doctor wants to do and what they're happy with. That's one of the things. But I find that more sublease doctors and that independent thing take more of a role to kind of initiative to do the next step. And that was one of the things with CODA that I really wanted to have doctors embrace to kind of, be independent, grow their practice, expand scope of practice as well for optometry. Because our profession is a legislative profession. It's changing. It's continuing to change. And I think there's always opportunities where in optometry, whether it's corporate or private, and doctors they just got to take it, by themselves, the initiative to do it. I never started in a busy practice. I was at a Sears Optical, and I found opportunities. I was able to have a good income. Net sometimes was the same as a lens crafters that I found out when I did a business evaluation for them. It's really the doctor and what you want to do.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think we're probably simpatico on a lot of these issues in terms of having independence as the doctor. I guess my perception is it doesn't matter whether or not you're like I agree with you that that physical location doesn't matter, but it does, I think, matter in general. I think it doesn't matter, but I do think that that the opportunity that you have when you have control, you have nobody, that there's a barrier between the doctor-patient relationship that allows you to integrate the tools and technologies that you need, that you feel is best going to serve your patient population.
Right.
I guess if I were going to think about the stumbling blocks that I see in other models, would be that for the long-term ability with our profession to continue to advance scope and advance that, accelerate that doctor-patient relationship where it's enhanced, would be that my observation is when, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but when students get out of school and they have all these they have all this training that's wonderful. They can manage all these diseases, but they get into any location, whether it's private, whether it's corporate, whether it's independently owned, or they're employed. If their mentors are in a model of basically refraction glasses, refraction contacts, refraction, like if that's the model, you made the point, they don't feel like they have time. If that goes on for too long, my concern is that you almost have to relearn how to manage those diseases. Not just it's one, you're relearning how to manage the diseases again, or refreshing your memory. And two, it's how do if I understand that the model, the way I generate revenue is refraction glasses, refraction contacts, right? If that's how I understand it, then it's really hard to figure out how do I generate revenue? What's my value in this other model? And then what I think happens when I talk to doctors and when I work with them, what I see is that they don't understand the value of those other services, so they don't take the time to delve into them. So the easy response is, I'm going to put a Band-Aid on it, and if it's really serious, the patient will come back and then we'll figure it out. Or I'm not going to deal with this. Once it gets to that second level of treatment where it's not getting better or it's not responding the way you want, well, I'm going to just let somebody else do this that does this all the time. And I actually believe what's best is that like you're describing, that doctor is basically that main point of most things for that patient. So do you see that same thing I'm seeing? And if that's true, how do we get beyond that?
Yeah, so you are very true. You hit the nail right on the head. I talked to a lot of doctors, and that's the case. And even if you just take the example of dry eye, they're like, just give some artificial tears. So, I mean, I took over this practice here, and that's what the doctor was doing. And I've incorporated simple things into the practice, like collagen plugs, other options like pads, nutraceuticals, to grow my business, and even something small like an anterior camera, just to show them and illustrate at patient education why it's important and why I'm prescribing certain things, and even just stuff with blepharitis and besides just lid scrubs, you have things in your practice that you can give, and follow-up visits. Those are ways to kind of increase, but the doctors don't do it, and we're all trained. It's easy to do. There's no investment. I mean, it's anterior seg stuff. It's easy stuff, right? So that has been something where some doctors have been a little nervous about, but I think it's just comfort zone, right? And I'm doing all right. I'm doing fine. I don't need to worry about it. Most of my, 50% of revenue in the industry comes from optical, right? And
yeah. Well, actually, if you look at the MBA metrics, so this is, I don't know how far this extends into corporate practices that are subleased, but if you look at independent practices across the country, 82% of every dollar that's generated in a practice is generated from the sales of glasses and contact lenses and routine examinations. So 82%.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and so I think, and 7% is generated from medical care.
Yeah. So the doctors don't have revenue from the optical. So some of the ones that can sell contact lenses, the average is about 20% of their revenue comes from contact lenses. Each office is different in what they have, but that's why they have expanded to medical, where instead of getting paid $40 for a routine exam, they're doing that to having the follow-up visits. They're trying to grow their business and trying to change the perception of their practice to patients to retain them as well. And to your point of how doctors can change, I have tried to partner with AOA and posted things in the group about legislative changes and what AOA is doing and why people need to join the AOA. But also with changes within corporate optometry, the group has done a lot of great things to kind of, change things in the industry where corporate would just be like, well, no, this is how we do it. Now they pay attention because 30,000 plus group, and a lot of information's out there. They've had to change the way they approach things and how they approach doctors. So it's been really the voice of a corporate OD to change things and how they want to do things in the practice. And there's a lot of communication. There's doctors, we're connecting doctors from California to Massachusetts and saying, look, I work for the same brand. What do you do? Oh, we're not doing this. And then knowing, how to work together. So there's a lot of work that I've done to kind of, have more of a say within corporate optometry from the doctor's perspective.
What do you think? So if we get to scope for a second, because I agree, you say there's 30,000 corporate ODs
in my group. So there's 30,000 members in my group. Some of them are corporate ODs. Some over the years have moved out. So it's hard to kind of monitor that. But there's a lot of corporate optometrists in the country. I think 30% right now is corporate ODs, and that number is going to grow, right? Especially as private equity purchases, as doctors go into the setting, as they open new practices. There's a big growth with offices opening locations, companies opening locations.
So I guess the thoughts I have are a couple. When we talk about scope of practice, one of the challenges that I do think is inherent is when we talk to legislators specifically, and also when we talk to when we testify, it is a challenge when our opponents want to characterize procedures that we do where you wouldn't want to have those done in attached to a big store. Like you brought up Walmart. So I think there's this sort of idea that makes it more challenging for people to say, oh, I don't know if I want to get, there's a bias inherently against do I want a medical procedure in Walmart? Like in the legislator's mind. Now, I think some of that's changing as you see some of the Walmart clinics kind of pop up for other medical services. I think that could change. But right now, it seems to be an effective tool, at least to some degree. So how do you think that that barrier, if we're all working toward that same goal, how do you think that barrier can become overcome, and how quickly can it be overcome where there's a perception of a legislator or a public regulator that it is, if I go to Sears or Walmart or I'm okay having a procedure done in there because I think it's going to be safe and I think it's going to be, the doctor's going to be well trained.
Sure. One big barrier is optometrists versus optometrists, right? So there's been some private practitioners that look down on ODs and things like that, on corporate ODs, and that's been one thing within the group that try to show that doctors practice the same way. It doesn't matter, all from the same school. But with legislation, I think we need to partner with the AOA to get more corporate ODs within the setting to work together with them to show them what they have and what they're doing. But also with Walmart Health, CVS Health, Walgreens has partnered with Physician Group and Four Eyes. This medical scope collaborative care pharmacy type is, I think, the new trend in the industry as well. So we'll see that, but I think it's a lot of getting corporate ODs involved with these things, and talk with the AOA with that, and say, look, I have a group called CODA. We got 800 members so far in the year. How can we work together to make changes?
Well, so I'm envisioning that you have that your members are pretty engaged, right, based on what you're talking about. But I will tell you that one of the frustrations in general when we think about legislative issues, specifically in my state, but also also across the country, it tends to be the doctors that are in private practice, that are stepping up to testify, to take time away from their practices, to invest, to do those things. So where are we missing, like as an association, where are we missing the opportunity to engage? So we know we reach out to them on a regular basis, but we miss them as members, and we miss them as engaged members as well. So I'm with you. We're all on the same team, and I think if we had not just every private practice OD, right, but every corporate practice OD working on the same side for these types of goals, whether it's scope of practice or access to patients or vision plan legislation, those sorts of things would be we would be an unstoppable force. But the reality is that it's becoming more and more challenging to engage. And I'm just wondering, how do we get over that in your perspective?
Yeah, I think we also need new perspectives, new people kind of coming through, more of a mentor program to show younger ODs what they can do with AOA and legislative things, kind of new leadership per se, new people coming through. If it's the same people over and over again, things don't change as much, and still that perception. I know a lot of corporate ODs that have practices that vested 3, 4 practices, 5 practices. They want these changes. With Massachusetts, big change, want a big change here just to treat glaucoma with the last state. And I work in Rhode Island, I'm Massachusetts license, and I just, drive 20 minutes and I can prescribe drops. A lot of ODs have donated money to PAC and try to do things within the corporate setting as well to do that. It's their it's to their benefit too, and to their patients, so they don't have to send a patient. But even like care, right? So like insurances and things like that, it reduces cost if things are getting done, so not repetitive, tests and things like that, saving time. And now with COVID, I think even being more efficient, getting things done in one setting and being done, right? And then some of the private practices are busier and they're booked out, and sometimes within a corporate setting too, they can get them in sooner if they're a newer practice because they're just starting up. But also too, they're able to have reduced fees per se. I'm not saying to do free exams at all, but because of chair costs being lower and things like that, to do that. Everyone makes their own fees based on chair costs and what the thing is. But we do have laws against free eye exams. There are patients that need services. And don't get me wrong, if I know a patient needs something, I'm happy to do that, for a patient. But I think sometimes like that, it's more of a marketing ploy to get patients in the offices.
When you think about Rhode Island specifically, or you were talking about Massachusetts as well. Well, I guess let's talk about Massachusetts. What sort of things are you seeing the corporate, like in terms of the leadership of the Massachusetts Association? Where are they missing the boat to try to, are there people in corporate optometry in Massachusetts that are saying, look, we want to really be able to help, but they're being turned away? Like you said, maybe the leadership needs to change. Are they being turned away? Are they just not being engaged? Are they not showing value for the association? I mean, like if that's the case, it would seem to me that anytime there's a bill in Massachusetts, and as you know, there has been one every single year for as far as I can remember to try to change some of these glaucoma things. And you guys are pretty close to being able to have some movement. But I mean, how many optometrists are in Massachusetts practicing in corporate locations? I mean, probably 1,000.
I don't have exact numbers. So I was on the executive board, and we had a president at one point was of MSO. So that's been thing. But I think just getting more doctors involved per se, that aspect. But Massachusetts, I think, is more of a medical. There's more like Harvard, the medical schools, things like that, and it's more political per se for that. But a lot of doctors have donated. But some doctors within the country say, "I'm not joining or I'm not helping because they're not including me. They're not, I want to be involved and they're not." And then, I've been involved, and I've been involved in Rhode Island as well. But it's been kind of something like, you just keep on knocking, you keep on poking, say, look, I want to be involved. I want to be, it's that. So I think we need to educate the younger doctors. We need to kind of take them by the hand and say, I'm doing this, come follow me, because if they feel like they're involved, they're invested into the profession, they're going to do more, and that's the future of our profession, right? Is the younger ODs. I've been out for 13 years. I can't say I'm a younger OD anymore, but this is why, I talk to docs and kind of give them advice. I wish I had someone that give me advice and say, do this, and not have to, don't get me wrong. I'm fortunate for learning from my mistakes, but it was kind of like the extra hurdles. Sometimes it's easier just to be like, this is the road you take. It's easier. So.
Would you have believed yourself if you were coming in telling people to take an easier road? Would you have believed you without going through all the trials and?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't be where I am today with all the things, the struggles and things like that that I've had. And it has not been easy for me. I'll be honest with you. There's been a lot of roadblocks over the years. Even trying to grow corporate optometry, been a lot of roadblocks. And now it's starting really to pay off. And the fact that I know that it's made a difference in a lot of ODs and helped them, it's very rewarding to me. But yeah, it's kind of like getting that, getting pushed down and getting back up again. Some days have been easier than others, I'll tell you that. So for any OD that's watching, whether it's, starting a side business, starting your own private practice, there's going to be bumps, but, there will be a reward at the end. It's just kind of persevering and kind of getting back up again.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good way to end it, Maria. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your perspective about corporate practice and also, also how we try to engage. I would love to see if we can engage, more corporate optometrists into our associations and actively working toward the same goals, because I think we ultimately do have that. So let's continue to chat about that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure. And I'm in touch with AOA to get more documents.